So President Biden, the one folks said that we had to vote for to get rid of Trump and get us back to normal or decent or whatever it is folks thought they were getting with Biden, had a lovely candlelight ceremony at the White House and sent out a nice tweet commemorating the 500,000 dead from coronavirus. Amid 500 lit candles representing 1,000 people each cascading down the double staircases of the White House's South Portico, the Bidens and the Harrises bowed their heads in a somber moment of silence at sundown under black bunting that was hung over the doorways they emerged from while the Marine Band played Amazing Grace. Biden later tweeted a picture of the captured moment with the words, quote, "To heal, we must remember," end quote. We certainly must remember and acknowledge those lost to this pandemic. But there is plenty about the response to this pandemic that Joseph Biden does not actually want us to remember. Not at all. Life-saving PPE was left to be produced by companies that made a profit off of them, but those products weren't even available for sale in many places for months after the virus began to spread. And I can tell you that at the height of the pandemic, my family couldn't get masks or gloves or hand sanitizer anywhere. We had to order ours from China through the website Wish, of all places. I'm not even kidding. Meanwhile, people in the countries that the U.S. calls socialist hellholes and communist dictatorships not only received from their governments the masks, gloves, sanitizers, and even cleaning supplies needed to ward off the virus personally and in their homes, but they also received money every month, and in some countries, even food and medicine delivered to them on a regular basis while they quarantined. But that's not what this government did. Oh, and I know that the last administration didn't do this, but if you notice, this administration isn't doing it either, even though responding to this pandemic better than the last guy did is what Joseph Biden campaigned on. Now, there are plenty of masks and gloves and sanitizer, and even Lysol is showing up on the shelves again now for sale. It's all for sale because this government is not providing anything to its people to stay safe. Still, there's no real replacement of wages lost due to the shutdown of businesses. So people falsely focused on the need to reopen businesses so people could have money to survive this pandemic instead of demanding that the government replace the wages lost of employees so they could stay home and stay safe from the virus. Unemployment payments are spotty in some states. Millions of people don't even qualify for unemployment. And if they do, others have had an incredibly difficult time getting payments processed. The $2,000 stimulus check that Biden promised if Raphael Warnock and Jon Ossoff were sent to the Senate has somehow turned into $1,400. And that's up in the air now, too, because have you gotten that? I haven't gotten that. We haven't gotten that. So, of course, there's now a big push to get kids back into school without really doing much to ensure the safety of the students as well as that of the staff and of the families those kids have to go home to, because all those unemployed people have to get back to work because the government is just not going to do anything to actually help people. And by the government, I mean Joseph Biden. And let's not ever forget that while the government run by Joseph Biden struggles to do anything for you and me, the banks received trillions of dollars in COVID relief funds off the top throughout the crisis. Remember that back in March, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell committed to offering $1 trillion a day in overnight loans to large banks. And that was in addition to the $1 trillion in 14-day loans it had already offered banks every week. Of course, those were loans, right? So they had to be paid back. But the fact that the government, a government entity, had no problem replacing the lost revenue of banks at the beginning of the pandemic and has continued to do so throughout so the banks don't fail, as well as carrying out a dizzying array of other market-focused efforts to stabilize the corporate and financial sector. But the same government can't seem to figure out how to, or honestly, whether whether it even should replace the lost income of citizens at the same time. And to me, that's, in a word, hypocritical. In another word, it's negligent. How about criminal? I really like that word. Because if people's wages were replaced, then everyone could pay their bills and rents and mortgages, and you get the idea. We've gone over this before. But the Biden administration, while some would argue, isn't as openly calloused toward the impact this pandemic is having on people as the Trump administration was, isn't doing any better by us in response to this pandemic. And doesn't that ultimately make Biden just as calloused as Trump? I think it does. But Biden doesn't want us to remember his promises that he's broken. He just wants us to remember that he's not as spectacularly and unapologetically boorish and repugnant in demeanor as Trump was, even though his policies so far, not that different in a lot of ways. I mean, it doesn't matter to the Black and brown immigrants being deported under Biden that he hasn't called Haiti or Guatemala or the countries they're being deported to dirty names like Trump did. They're still being deported just as they were under Trump. And in fact, because of the Department of Homeland Security's backtracking on Biden's pledge to stop deportations in his first 100 days, Biden is actually on track to deport more people in his first year in office than Trump did in his. I don't think Biden's response to the question asked of him about canceling $50,000 of student loan debt instead of the measly $10,000 he's proposing at the town hall last week was any less dismissive of the people's financial struggles than Trump had. When asked if he'd reconsider his position after it was explained to him why canceling $50,000 was critical to ease the crushing debt burden so many were under and how he would make that happen, that man stood on that stage and curtly said, "I will not make that happen." So what? He was nicer about it and told some jokes to ease the tension. Y'all still have all that student debt, don't you? But this is what Biden is banking on, that we won't remember the things he promised because we're so appeased by his decency and his alleged candor, his willingness to talk to the everyman, just so he can tell them, no, I'm not doing anything for you that I said I would do. So yes, we absolutely must remember those lives lost to the pandemic, that this government could have responded better and saved. And we must remember the promises Biden has made that he's already broken, that he absolutely wants you to forget about. Remember and never forget that he did say that nothing would fundamentally change. Follow Luke Mon Nation on patreon.com/Luke Mon Nation for lots of great content.